Welcome to this elective, this webinar called How to Lead When You're Not in Charge. This elective will take about 60 minutes or so, where we're going to walk through and talk through the concept of leadership, specifically when you are not in a leadership position. What are the things that you can do? What are the steps that you can take so that you can properly lead even though you may not be in charge? So, join me, won't you? So let's talk. I've got a question for you. Do you ever regret? It can be with work, it can be without it. But have you ever had maybe a relationship that didn't work out? Or you had a conversation one time where you were talking with somebody and then they gave some short little quip and you didn't know what to say, and then you woke up the next morning and you're like, I should have said that. Right? And you have those things, and even though it's not a big deal at the moment, later you're like, I regret not saying that. That would have been so good. Or maybe you have a regret with something that you could have done better with a friend, or maybe with somebody close in your life. Right? I think we all have these regrets. I would even say some of us have regrets in our careers. Right? In our jobs, it took too long doing this one thing, or and it took me away from being able to do something I really want, or whatever the case may be. I would say many people in their own professional lives would say that they have regret of some form of some sort. Maybe they missed out an opportunity to go for a position that they wanted, and they don't feel like they'll ever get that back. Or maybe you had the opportunity to take something and you didn't. Whatever the case may be, many people in their lives would say that they have some sort of regret. If that's you, don't worry. That's normal. You might have it. I have it. We all have it. We all experience in some form of regret. But the real problem comes when we sit by, idly waiting our turn to take some sort of action to those things. Think about this. Have you ever walked into a grocery store and you've seen those ginormous grocery carts that have like the car thing in the front of them? Like sometimes it feels like at our jobs, like we're driving those grocery carts, right? You get really excited. As a child, the children run into those things. They sit down and then they're driving, and then maybe there's like a little horn thing that they can honk or something like that, right? And there's a lot of enthusiasm about it until they start turning the wheel, only to find out they're going the opposite direction. And that can be super frustrating for a child. At first, they don't really make that connection, but when they do, it gets frustrating. Why? Because the child suddenly realizes they're not in control. They're driving past the cookie aisle and they want to go down it. I think for a lot of us in our careers, we sometimes feel that way, and we get really frustrated when that situation comes up because we realize that even though we feel like we're in control, we're not. So I have another question for you. Why did you sign up for this training? Why did you decide to come and sit to walk through this? Do you feel like in your position you have good ideas but you're not heard? Do sometimes you feel insignificant? Do you not have the title that you want yet? I mean, what made you sign up for this? In this webinar, we're going to acknowledge that I think sometimes we make the mistake of substituting positional authority as a prerequisite for effective leadership, when in fact that couldn't be farther from the truth. So let's talk quickly and say that there is a myth that says you need to lead to be in charge. If that is a myth, break it. The goal is not to lead. Anybody who is looking to lead is not really actually looking to lead as much as they're looking to influence. And for the purpose of what we're talking about today, we're going to focus on this word influence. The purpose isn't to lead when you're not in charge. Our purpose is really that we want to influence. We want to influence others. We want to influence our manager. We want to influence change. There's a number of different things that we want to influence. And when we are an effective influencer, that's when we are an effective leader. influence is what we all actually want. And oftentimes influence turns itself into management, right? The people who carry the most influence or the influence in the right places are the ones who develop into managers. And management is a great thing to pursue, right? Management has increased responsibility. There's usually a pay increase that comes with it. It's a good career builder. And oftentimes management is what makes things happen. It's those middle managers that when there's a directive or something coming down the pike, the middle managers are the ones that actually make things happen. They're the ones that kind of carry influence because of their title. Now, you know as well as I do, some middle managers they manage because that's what they are. They're managers by title, but they may not be the most effective influencers. And our goal is how can we create that influence? We also know that management isn't for everyone, right? Our credit union here has about a 1-to-4 ratio of managers to individual contributors. And when you consider that not everybody, their next position is going to be a CEO or a senior executive, that ratio gets a lot wider, meaning that it's tough to become a manager. It's not just somebody who is really good at what they do. Well, they're the next ones. They're going to be a manager. No, a good manager is someone who has a variety of different things, and we talk about them all the time in training. But influence is a large piece of that. So my question again, what is your motivation for being here? Is it to become a manager, or is your motivation something better or something bigger? As a warning, if you're unsettled or discontent, remember that is not a valid why as to why you want to become a manager, maybe why you want to become a leader. That's an effect of your actual why, whatever the why is. So what is your real reason? And more importantly, will that motivation change once you have influence? So remember, influence is what causes change. And so what should change and why? Well, the first thing that needs to change, presumably, is us, or is you. Jim Collins, in his book Good to Great, has a great quote about this. He says, for many people, the first question when talking about change that occurs is, but how do I persuade my CEO to get it? My answer? Don't worry about that. Each of us can create a pocket of greatness. Each of us can take our own area of work and influence and can create or can concentrate on moving it from good to great. It doesn't really matter whether all the CEOs get it. It only matters that you and I do. So now it's time to get to work. So, in order to get to work, in order to really start on this process of gaining and creating influence, the first thing that we need to do is we need to have a good sense of our own identity. If we don't know our own identity, we don't know how we're going to influence somebody else, and we don't know exactly how we want to influence them. So let me ask you a question. If you had to give a 5-second summary of yourself, what would you say? Maybe you'd say something like, hi, my name is Jim. I'm from Lowell, Massachusetts. I work at a credit union. I have a wife and 2 beautiful daughters, and I love to surf. Right? And that's a very high-level overview of who that person is. Right? We see this on game shows all the time. Sit down and watch a game show and they'll be like, hi, who are you? And somebody will go, hi, my name is such and such, and I have blah, blah, blah. And they'll go through that whole thing. We see that all the time. But the truth is, that's the easy stuff, right? That's the highlight reel. That's what people put on their Facebook profile. That's not really who they are. Right? What if our 5-second summary had a little more, I don't know, honesty? Right? What if that person walked up and had to give their 5-second summary? And it was like, hi, my name's Jim. I have a house that's falling apart, and my love for chocolate cake has me 30 pounds overweight. And honestly, my coworkers drive me crazy because every time they stop by to tell me about their recent vacation, it drives me nuts. Right? Could you imagine if somebody on a game show introduced themselves that way? I mean, we would be appalled, right? Because we're expecting their highlight reel, and instead we get something that's a little more honest. But the truth is, isn't that stuff probably the most valuable when it comes to understanding our own identity? We are our own worst critic or our own best critic, depending on how you think of it. Right? We can see our faults better than anybody else, but But as we start to recognize those things, that gives us a healthier perspective on where we need to develop, where we need to go so that we can understand our identity even better. Right? The more honest we are, the more we get at the core of who we really are, which can really help us moving forward. So Clay Scroggins says this, right? He says, near the core of what makes a person a leader is their sense of identity. He goes on to say that how you lead without formal authority has less to do with your behavior and far more to do with your identity. We focus so much on behaviors. If I maintain good eye contact, if I'm friendly, if I'm outgoing, and I do all these sorts of things, then I'll become a more effective leader. Well, no, that's actually not really it. It has less to do with your behavior and who you are and your understanding of who you are, and then how you interact with other people. How not the characteristics that make you, the characteristics that make that person, gives you a better understanding of how the two of us can interact with one another and how the two of us can work together. Your identity is the linchpin to having effective influence. So it's easy enough to say, I know my identity, right? I know what makes me up and such. But do you? Hey, do you really? So let me help. If you want to thoughtfully think through your identity, it does require some effort. And it's going to seem silly at the time, but at the end of it, you're going to come away with some really powerful things. So here are 5 categories I can give you to consider and to think through your identity. Your first one is your past, right? If you think about what has made you you up until this point. The easiest way to do this is to chronological your life. And specifically, to get out a piece of paper and create a list of your 5 highest moments, your 5 best memories, and your 5 worst ones. Just make a list. Write it down on a piece of paper. What are 5 things that are probably the best things that happened in my life? And the 5 opposite. You'll be surprised how it gives you a pretty accurate description of your past up until this point. But take a moment and do that. Second thing we'd say is your people, right? Now, I'm not saying like, hey, all my people, come over here. Now, what I specifically mean is the people around you, how do they perceive you? What do they think of you when they think of such and such, your name? What's the first thing that they think of? Do they think of somebody who is excellent at such and such? Or do they think of somebody who's very friendly? Or do they think of somebody who's super passionate about blank? Is it in a good light? Is it in a bad light? Is it something where you're really passionate about a great cause? Or is it something where you're so passionate about people who are close to you that maybe you ignore people who aren't, and those people who aren't as close to you feel a little bit neglected? I don't know. Are you super passionate about some political cause? Do you have a lot of people who rally around you for that and have other people who dare not bring the topic up with you? Right? How do other people perceive you? Do you know? And then, when it comes to your people, who are the loudest voices? Right? Who are the people that when they speak when they speak to you, you are listening? Right? There's other people who might talk and you might have a reaction like, oh, I'm sorry, well, what? Because you weren't listening, right? And from a very practical standpoint, that might be how it plays out. But the truth is that because they're speaking, they didn't get your attention right away. But there are people in our lives that as soon as they start to talk, we listen. So when those people speak, are you aware of how they're affecting you? And are you aware of how they are influencing what you believe? Your people shape your identity. Third category we say is your personality. Right? What's your self-understanding and your wiring that creates the personality that you have? And we can do these personality assessments and figure out, I'm more outgoing, I'm not outgoing, I'm introverted, I'm extroverted, any of those things. We can do all that, and that can reveal things about us, but really, that's somebody else taking a couple questions and putting it in this little square box that they've created. It's not really a full and complete understanding of who you are. Really, only you can do that because only you know your past, only you know your people, only you know what has gone into your life up until this point. So what's your level of self-understanding? What's your level of your wiring? right? How do your activities align with what your natural bent is, right? What do you enjoy doing when you go home? Let's say you have 3 hours that you can do whatever you want with. What would you do with that time? Do you know? Right? These are the things that go into your natural personality. Those are the things that go with your natural bend. The same way that wood has a natural bend to it, that's how you make curved pieces and such. All of us have a natural bend where we are drawn to certain things over others. So do you know what those things are? What we would say is your purpose, right? Your purpose goes beyond your personality, right? Your purpose says essentially what you believe about why you're on earth will deeply affect the opportunities you see available to you. You know, it's the question, right? Why are we here on earth? What's our purpose? What would you say, right? Are you going to give that answer? It's like, well, we're here on earth to help one another. Or we're here to raise a strong next generation. Are we here to eliminate poverty? Are we here to eliminate food hunger? Are we here to help each member make smart financial choices? Right? What is your purpose? What you believe about why you're here on earth will deeply affect the opportunities you see available to you. You know what the best way to identify your purpose is? Instead of wandering aimlessly and just kind of hoping that you do something productive and purposeful with your life such that people show up at your funeral, do something that may seem cheesy, but write out a mission statement. Just think through it. Every organization that has some sort of health behind it has a mission statement. We know ours here, right, is to help each member make smart financial choices. But do you have a personal mission statement? Ironically, some of the most successful people that you'll meet in life do. Because they have a purpose behind what they're doing. They've given it some thought, and then they work towards that. So do you want to identify your purpose? List out a mission statement, because your feeling of purpose directly correlates with the degree of security you feel in your identity. If you feel like you know what your purpose is and you're working towards that, you have a more secure identity than you may have had before. People who don't have a sense of identity, people who don't have a mission statement, are much more likely to be wandering aimlessly and sure hope they run into something of purpose. So instead of letting life be a little more random, why don't you let life be a little bit more purposeful? And establish and dictate what your purpose is instead of hoping to run into it at some point. Fifth, I would say, is your priorities. And your priorities are what your values, things that you consider deeply true. Because the truths you have or that you believe in, they will decide and shape your identity. So if you don't know what your truths are, if you don't know what your priorities are, list them out. Like core values for us as a credit union, right? We have 4 of them. They're what we expect all of our employees to be doing at any given moment. For you, list out your core values. What are the truths that you have decided are going to be super important to you that you are going to live your life by? You know, and if you have a hard time doing this, I got some advice for you. Track your hours in a week. Dare I say, track your minutes in a week. That will vary. The majority of your time, what you spend doing, will show what your priorities are. Do it for a week, and then look back at it and say, is this, the amount of time I'm spending on these things, is this an accurate portrayal of what my priorities are? If that sounds intimidating, I'll give you another option. Probably will sound just as intimidating. Track your dollars in and out of your account. Every dollar, every penny. Track it in and out of your account for a month. And all of the accounts, anywhere where you do any sort of transaction, a checking account, a savings account, a credit card, whatever it is, track every single dollar. And look at where the majority of your money goes. Does that align with what your priorities are? Does it align with your core values? Those 2 things, how you spend your money and how you spend your time, will dictate what the core values are of any individual person if they take the time to look at it. If you're afraid to look at it, that means you really should be looking at it. See, once you have a better understanding of your identity, the things that make up it, the things that come out of this category, once you have these categories, once you have a better understanding of your identity, you have a stronger understanding of your influence to lead without formal authority. You don't necessarily need a manager title across your desk. When you know your mission statement, your purpose, your priorities, your ability to influence becomes 10 times stronger, even if you don't have that title. So remember this, that you are always developing wherever you are. Even today, with your responsibilities, you are developing as a leader. 5 years from now, 10 years from now, you're going to be developing even perhaps in a different way. But you are always developing as a leader, even right now. So what I'd like to do right now is I'd like to look at 4 behaviors. And these are 4 behaviors that natural leaders do, or these are 4 behaviors that influencers do. And so we're going to go through them, and I'll encourage you that if you are looking to lead without formal authority, that these 4 behaviors will be a strong application for you. So, number 1, it's called lead yourself. Right? To put it succinctly, we can just say, do your job. Right? Do your job well. The things that are expected of you, the things that people who are responsible for managing you are expecting of you, do them. Do your job and do it well. But it's so much more than that, because the reality is that everybody is responsible for something. At minimum, you are responsible for yourself. You know, when in your job, you are responsible for other things too, your department, the individual responsibilities you have, keeping this information organized, servicing this person, whatever the case may be. But take the job out of it, you are responsible for leading yourself well. You are in charge of every situation that you have, and even in situations where you feel like you don't have any say in what's happening, you are responsible for what you take away from any given situation. You're responsible from what you learn and how it's going to develop you. In fact, your boss is not in charge of this, you are in charge of this. You are in charge of your takeaways, what you learn, your own development from every single situation you present, especially the difficult ones. If you struggle with this, right? If you struggle with your the idea of leading yourself in this way, I would encourage you to make a list, right? Make a list of the things that you're in charge of, and think of the things outside your work specifically. Like, go home and just look around and say, well, I'm in charge of this. If nobody but me does it, it won't get done. Or I'm in charge of my attitude in response to this, or my response to this. List out all the things you're in charge of. I'm guessing your list is probably going to be a little bit bigger than you think of. You could even be as simple as, I'm in charge of what I'm going to wear today, right? Because there are important things that come of that you might not even think of. What you wear, how you style your hair, how you talk, all of those things have influence on the people around you. If you dress like a slob, people are going to interpret that you're a slob. If you dress professional, people are going to interpret that you're a professional. Even those small things of, I'm in charge of what I'm going to wear, or I'm in charge of my attitude in the morning, I'm in charge of the shampoo I'm going to use. All those types of things, you'd be surprised at how many things you're in charge of. So take a moment and make a list. List out those things so that you have a better understanding of all the things that you're responsible for, all the things that you are in charge of. So, our biggest challenge when it comes to leading ourselves, when it comes to taking ownership of things, is when we have the urge to do something and then we're told no to something. Right? I want to take the initiative to do this. Oh, I'm sorry, the answer is no. Right? Especially when we're very passionate about it, it can send us spiraling. It can send us into a self-defeating motion. And the biggest temptation for us is to abdicate a responsibility and say, you know what, that's their fault, not mine. The question then becomes, how well are you leading yourself as a result? You know, I had nothing to do with this is a bad leadership tactic, right? Is to just throw up your hands and say, you know what, this is somebody else's fault. If you've ever gotten to a situation where you're trying hard to lead yourself and then suddenly you've had the control taken away from you, remember 2 things. If you're in this situation, responding to someone telling you no. Number 1, recognize that you're getting frustrated, that you're starting to spiral and you're starting to blame other people. And the second thing to do is to fix yourself. don't do that. It is a tall tale sign of bad leadership. So even though you may not be in charge of whatever that thing is that has come and has told you no, the truth is you're still in charge of your response and what you're going to do from there. Tom Watson says this: nothing so conclusively proves a man's ability to lead others as what he does on a day-to-day basis to lead himself. How you are leading yourself in these situations is the greatest indicator of your ability to lead somebody else. When you're told no, and your reaction and your response to that is a great indication of when you are actually in a position of formal authority, how you're going to lead other people through it. So how well do you lead yourself? Behavior number 2, we would say, is to choose positivity. So I don't know if you've ever been in this situation where you've been in like a really beautiful place and you're like, oh, you know what I gotta do? I gotta take a picture. And so you take out your phone and you try to take a picture and it never quite does it justice. And you're looking at it and then you kind of look at your phone and you're like, that just doesn't quite look the same, but at least I'll remember it, right? So it's either never as good as you want to see, or you simply just can't fit it all, right? Like you try to back up or you try to tilt it like a funny angle and try to get like the picture of whatever you're doing, trying to get it in the screen, and it never quite works. So, it's interesting. The first phone to really change that was the iPhone 5, because iPhone 5 introduced something called the pano function, or the panoramic function. So what they did is they looked at photos and they're like, this is such a beautiful like panoramic picture, but people would just be clicking 1, 2, 3, 4. iPhone's like, well, we can fix that. And so they just have this one function now that you press your button and you hold it and you realize how like shaky your lines are, right? But you're still trying to get that whole panoramic picture, even horizontal or something really tall in front of you, whatever the case may be, right? And so that was a revolutionary thing, because suddenly we could see so much more of the picture as we zoomed in and tried to get a better idea of the landscape that was all around us, right? And then as phones keep developing, their cameras keep getting better and better and such. And so now it's getting closer to matching kind of what we see and how we've interacted with that, right? But now these phones, the phones allow us to have a panoramic view, to see things that are outside of just the little screen that's in front of us. Our perspective is everything, right? And so the more that we can see, the more we understand. And so Stephen Covey says this: we must look at the lens through which we see the world as well as the world we see. And that the lens itself shapes how we interpret the world. So thinking back to our understanding of our identity, when we understand our identity, we get a better idea of the lens that we're looking through, the phone that we're looking through, and the picture that we're seeing is because we only have the perspective of that phone. But the better that we can get a panoramic view, the better we can start to see outside what we might normally see just ourselves, the more complete picture we actually end up being able to see. And the more complete picture we start to understand of any given situation. See, the more we understand the true happenings outside our role, the wider angle we have in the whole organization. And the more we can shape our role in context, the better off we are in our ability to lead. The better off we are in our ability to influence. So, what does that mean for you? Well, that means that you are responsible for increasing how informed you are. Right? Take a look at it. Take a panoramic view of what's happening in your role and the things outside of it. Especially if you see yourself as maybe stuck in a rut, or you don't see like you're moving, or there's enough things happening around you. Step back for a second. What's happening outside my role? What am I not seeing? What's my manager dealing with on a daily basis that maybe I don't have context for? And as soon as you see that, as soon as you have a better idea of what's happening, you are in a better position to influence, because you're going to act with more discipline, diligence, and purpose. See, the sooner you can connect your why am I here, the sooner you can connect to having influence with others. So this perspective is a posture of leadership. It will help you see the positive in an otherwise negative situation. See, positivity is a choice and can be developed over time. So choose positivity. So, what are some byproducts of choosing positivity? Well, number one, I would say that there becomes energy in your attitude. You see, when somebody walks into a room and they are positive, they can change any team dynamic just because of their positivity. Now, if you are somebody who's usually a negative Nelly and you come in, you're kind of sad, and then just one day you choose to be super energetic and super positive about things, you know what, that's a great thing, but it has to be daily. Doing it daily will help others to see that this is something that is consistent of you, and it allows you to consistently have that positive energy in your attitude. The second thing we would say is to have humility towards those who are in authority. Respect them while they're there, especially if you struggle with thinking whether or not they belong there. The sooner that you can have humility and say, you know what, that person is there, they are my manager for a reason. The more you respect them there, the better off you're going to be. And it also helps you to have patience, because if you believe that you're in line for that position, your time will come. The third is to have unity with your coworkers specifically. And a panoramic view tells us that and helps us to understand that we're better together than we are apart. And so once you realize that and see the different talents and the diversity of what different people will bring, the sooner you will see that this is a positive thing for the organization, for the team, for the department. So choose positivity. Third is to think critically. Clay Scroggins goes on to say that learning how to exercise the skill of thinking critically for the good of others is essential to leading when you're not in charge. Now, I don't know about you, but I feel like we've lost this, right? I feel like we have gotten to this situation where we don't know how to think critically anymore. So what happens have you ever been in a situation where you needed a recipe idea? Or maybe you need to fix something around the house, or maybe you had to figure out how to do something on your phone. What did you do? Did you Google it? Did you YouTube it? Maybe you asked Alexa? I don't know, right? By the way, if you haven't ever seen that Amazon Echo Silver skit from Saturday Night Live, I would strongly encourage you to do it. It is so funny. But anyways, we've stopped learning how to think, and we've started to asking computers to do our thinking for us, right? I need to know what to make for dinner. I have chicken, pasta, and sauce. What should I do with that? Right? Or I need to figure out how to change the oil in my car, or I need to figure out how to, save my photos or something like that off my phone, right? We don't necessarily know right away how to do that, and we've lost the ability to sit down and try to figure things out. And so we'll ask a computer how to, we'll ask Siri, we'll ask Alexa or something, and they'll direct us and they'll tell us exactly how. So the truth is that in our dependence on computers to help us think through those things, what we've lost is our ability to think through how to do our jobs well. And the truth is that our computers aren't doing all of our jobs yet. Right? They definitely can't satisfy our ambition to see opportunities and to take a creative approach to things. Only you can. And so when you can think critically in your role, then your role, your department, your group stands to benefit. So oftentimes when we're told no, we think we need to be in charge to get things done. That's not true. Somebody who is optimistic, who takes that no, sees it as an opportunity, is positive, and thinks critically, they're the ones who can respond thoughtfully to that situation instead of saying like, well, they told us no, and we're done. No. Somebody who can think through this and see it as an opportunity is the one who can move forward the best and see something positive in it all. So every great leader is a critical thinker. They can't escape it. And in fact, if you are one, if I have your attention right now and you're taking 2 sets of notes, what you're learning and what you would do differently if you were hosting this. Right? Or maybe you're at a seminar and you would do that, right? You're taking notes of what they're learning, and the whole time you're thinking is like, this trainer is terrible, or this, I don't like their PowerPoint, or I don't like blah, blah, blah. And you're thinking through how you do the whole thing differently. That's because you are a natural critical thinker. That is a fantastic thing. And for somebody who's like you, who's doing that, your mind is naturally bent to making things better. That is an excellent skill that you don't want to lose. sight of. So critical thinkers ask questions. It's at their heart. They don't criticize. They learn to challenge assumptions, uncover behaviors and actions, and go to the what if realm. What if this could be better? They're looking at causes and effects. This has happened and now this has. And they're making those connections. They connect things like feelings to behaviors. This person acted this way because they felt this way. Or this person did a really great job because they felt this way. They are critical thinkers are self-aware and they connect similar feelings to others. It's a skill that can be developed. Right? So for you, if you are looking to develop this thinking critically skill, and encourage you in a couple different ways. The first thing I would encourage you is through 4 subtle shifts in your thinking. Right? The first thing is to do this, is to stop thinking as an employee. Start thinking as an owner. So what happens when you see a piece of trash in the parking lot? When you're walking in and you see a rapper doing there, do you walk past it, or worse, do you call facilities to come pick up the trash? Or do you just go pick it up? Right? Owners pick it up. Why? Because their reputation is on the line. But employees don't. Stop thinking as an employee. Start thinking as an owner, and you'll be surprised at how your perspective on things change. Number 2, stop stacking your meetings. Instead, build buffer time in your schedule between meetings to allow yourself time to think and prepare and give room for new ideas. You know, some of us think that we're being really efficient. If we know that we have a number of meetings, if we can finagle them and coordinate them to have one after another, it's true, we can, but we have to focus on the one meeting, and then immediately sometimes we have to leave that meeting before it's done and then quickly transition to something else without giving it the due time and diligence to prepare for it. So stop stacking your meetings. Build some buffer time into it. If you know that you have stacked meetings coming, put some 15-minute blocks in there, half-an-hour blocks in there. Just busy yourself on your calendar. Because what it'll do is it'll let you debrief from previous one and start preparing, planning for the next one, and getting your mind there so you can think a little bit more creatively about it. This is especially helpful for those who are natural creative thinkers. Allow yourself that time to prepare in that way. You'll be surprised how much more improved your preparation will be for that meeting. Cognitive psychologist Scott Barry Kaufman says that 72% of all people get their creative ideas in the shower. Why? Because it's uninterrupted mental space. So, now we're not going to build a shower here at the credit union. Heaven forbid, don't do that right before a meeting. But the idea is that the more that you can build that buffering space into your day, the more creative you allow yourself to be. Number 3 is to stop being critical and start thinking critically. Oftentimes these two things get confused. Some people start to think that the idea of thinking critically is to criticize something. No. No leader sets out to become cynic or critical. Critical. It becomes a snare. Because they look at a situation and say, you know what, this could be better. Why could it be better? Because this is terrible. And suddenly they transition from doing a great job of thinking critically to start being critical of things without actually showing improvement. It's a spiral. So anytime that you are looking to offer improvement or offer something to make it better, check your motive. Right? Someone who wants to be critical, someone who is critical wants the other person to lose, but someone who is a critical thinker wants the other person to win. So check your motive. What's the purpose of you being critical about something? And number 4, finally, would say stop giving others a grade, start lending them a hand. Challenging assumptions can come across as grading someone, right? We've always done this way. Why do we do it this way? Can we do it better? Well, maybe the person that you're approaching is the one who thought of doing it that way. And suddenly they feel like they're being graded or they're being criticized. So check your posture in the words that you use. Always present a solution to your problem. Never, ever present a problem without saying what you think you should do about it. And a solution that probably will work. If you find yourself in this situation, always keep your blood pressure low and make sure you present what's called a compliment sandwich. If you have to give, if you are being critical about something, make sure you're sandwiching it between 2 positive things. Especially knowing it might come off as personal. Before I tell you what the 4th behavior is, I want to tell you a story. There's a young man who who lived in the Atlanta area, and he was a pretty strong young guy, but his downfall was that he had a pickup truck and lots of friends who needed help moving. Soon enough, he found himself on just at least once a month helping people move because they wanted his help lifting and moving things, but they also knew his pickup truck would be particularly helpful. And so he was invited one time to come and help move a large piece of furniture, and when he arrived, he came down to the basement only to find this enormous pool table. And so him and a buddy were looking at that, knowing full well that pool tables are super heavy. Why they are made out of slate, I can't tell you, but that slate makes those things so heavy. And so as him and his friend are trying to figure out how are we going to move this pool table, he remembers a 75-year-old man who was sitting in the basement, and every time that they would move the pool table and maybe they would bump something or it would slip, the man would look back and be like, "Don't let it beat ya." Right? And for this guy, it was said multiple times because they kept like running into things and bumping things and trying to turn it one way or the other, and the guy every single time, without fail, would just say, "Don't let it beat ya." Right? That was the only thing the guy said. Now, I remember personally, one time I met somebody about getting this like armoire dresser thing, and for whatever reason, I was the only one that was going to get it. But when I got there, it turned out to be like 7 feet tall. I am not 7 feet tall. It also turned out to be, I don't know, like 60 or 70 pounds and taller than me. And so I can lift 60, 70 pounds, no problem. But with something that's pretty top heavy, and if it slips, it can break very easily, it becomes a lot more of a challenge. And so I remember trying to wrestle this thing and get into the car. I had to flip it upside down, and oh heavens, it's in my house. It's fine. But all I can think of is the whole time is as like I'm rocking it and trying to tip it towards me, all I'm thinking is, "Don't let it beat you." Right? And so I didn't. I got it in the car. I drove it home. Then I had one of my neighbors lift it, and he looked at me in disbelief that I got it in the car, which I was a little surprised myself too. See, the fourth behavior here is to reject passivity. You see, when we're in control or when we are in authority, we feel more tied to an outcome, which naturally brings more intentionality and assertiveness in our leadership. We are responsible to make sure this thing looks good or this thing happens. But if we don't have control or don't have authority, the natural temptation is to be passive and to become disconnected from the outcome. Reject passivity. Don't let it beat you. Right? Just because if something goes wrong, it's not necessarily reflective of you, is not a good reason not to be fully invested in what's happening. When something doesn't go as planned, or a decision was taken from you, your response indicates your leadership. The easiest route is to be passive, because the decision was taken from you. Reject passivity. Don't let it beat you. So if you want to reject passivity, if you want to be taking action on things, well, here's a couple of things to consider. Number one, be aware of your natural response to these situations. When something is taken from you, how do you respond to it? How do you react? Be aware that not everybody reacts in a way that they should. And so be willing to accept failure as a learning opportunity, because the best leaders learn and move forward with intentionality. You see, I personally have learned not to let my gut response be my only response, because I know a better response is coming after I let it settle a little bit. If I can sit and think through why or what opportunities now presented to me because that no was said, there's a good chance that I will have a healthier response to it if I let it sit. So be willing to accept failure as a learning experience. Be aware of what your initial reaction is, and then respond separately. Third is to look around to add responsibilities to your current role. So take the first step in addressing it when nobody else is. If you want to reject passivity, but you feel like you're stuck or you feel like you're not doing things of value, look around and see if there's something else that you can involve yourself in that you know would matter to other people. It may be a small and menial task, but it might make a bigger difference than you think. Right? Have you ever walked into a situation, a place, and somebody like greeted you and shook you by hand, and then you started to notice things around you, and you're like, wow, they really paid attention to blank or blank. It's those small things, those little things that people are like, these things make a difference, or these things make an impact. And so people will invest in those. Look around for opportunities to add to your current role, because if you take the first step in addressing it when no one else is, your manager will notice. And fourth, similar to this, look around for problems that need to be solved. Add value to the vision. If your department has a vision, how do you add value to that? If the organization has a vision, how do you add value to that? What are you doing to work towards that? Managers trust people most who are addressing problems that they don't even know yet. So can you do that? Be proactive, not reactive. Reactivity perpetuates passivity. Look around for problems that need to be solved. So if you're waiting in your current role, what can you learn from those who are around you? Or what can you learn from things that are around you? And how can you use it to move yourself forward? Tim Cooper says this: you will never passively find what you do not actively pursue. So if you don't want to find anything, don't look for it. But if you are looking for a way to have influence, actively look for it. Inevitably, when you are pursuing these 4 behaviors and you are looking to develop your influence and make things better, you are going to run into a situation where you are going to challenge your boss, where you're going to challenge your manager. Because as you're working on developing these leadership characteristics and increasing your influence, you will be in situations where you're going to have to challenge them on something. And so it goes without saying that this can go badly, and it can go badly quickly. So we can come up with our own list of why it's going to go bad, but let me share with you a couple of reasons so it helps to frame what we're going to do about it. So your natural instinct is going to be to challenge the status quo. Why would you be content with solid results when you can have great results? But the question is, can you challenge well? Because the people who do challenge well have the emotional intelligence to manage this conflict without limiting their career, because they not only understand their motivation, the purpose, but they're able to think through the impact it's going to have elsewhere. So what are some things to remember? Well, number one is remember this, that change is challenging. You and your boss might see things differently, especially change. Your boss may be a little more reluctant to change, and you might be eager to, right? If that's the case, don't worry. It's normal. Right? Don't forget this. But know that the more personal your manager's work is, the more personal the challenge can become. That's because change can be personal. If your manager invests a lot of time in their work, and they invest a lot of time in managing other people, and if they are really proud of the results that are coming out of the department, then know that any change is going to feel like a personal attack. And you need to frame what you're going to say to help understand that it's not personal. But know this, that great leaders won't get defensive. They'll see change as an opportunity to do something better. See, change can be perceived as a criticism as well of past leadership, and can cause managers to feel indirectly criticized. It's partly because they might have been the person who created this process, this system, this report, whatever the case may be. And so for you to come in and challenge it, it's going to seem like it's critical of their work. Or they may not have had an ownership stake, but they've believed that it's been valuable, and now you are challenging it to say maybe this isn't valuable anymore. And that can be a criticism that managers don't usually respond well to. So frame your communication with this mind. Awareness is a great first aid for ignorance. But these are different reasons why it can go badly. So as you're thinking about how to challenge some things, let me give you some statements to avoid or things to think through that you don't want to say when you're in the situation where you're about to challenge on something. Now, you can think of your own statements, but these are some good ones to keep in mind. First is this: comparing to another organization or worse at a previous job. So your statement says something like this: you know what, I don't think this is good because, you know, when I was at my previous job, we did it this way and it worked out way better. It would be easy for a manager to turn around and be like, maybe you should go back to the previous job because they're not us. And if you liked it better there, then maybe that's probably a better place for you. Other organizations, other jobs, they're not us. They're not here. And if we want to creatively think forward, we can learn from other places, but we want to do our own thing. Don't compare yourself to another organization. Don't compare yourself to another job. Second, declaring what you're doing isn't working. This goes back to what we said earlier: never present a problem without presenting a solution. So coming in with a statement and be like, you know what, we need to stop doing this because it's just clearly not working. Okay. And what do you suggest? Don't make your manager ask you that, and heaven forbid you say something like that and then don't have something else to say to follow up. Present a solution to the problem. Remember, great employees are ones who recognize a problem before the managers even do. But recognizing a problem without having a solution towards it really damages your own credibility. Third, blaming a situation on anyone, especially your boss. Remember, change can be challenging, and it can be criticism. So certainly don't point that out, right? Don't say it's like, you know what, this isn't working, probably because you created it. Heavens, you are finding your way to the exit door to never come back, right? Don't blame a situation on anyone, especially your boss. You know, this is the passing the buck mentality. You know, if such and such who sits over there, you know, if they just would figure things out, it would be a whole lot better. If they could just get their act together, then we wouldn't even have this problem. Don't pass the buck. You have to see this as an opportunity, and what can you do to make it better? Finally, offering an ultimatum for your future. Bad strategy, right? If this doesn't change, I'm going to leave. Now, if it's a legal thing or something like this, like a harassment type thing, that's something else. But when you're looking to improve something, make it better, you can't go in and say, like, you know what, if we don't buy the software that's going to make everything better, then I'm just going to leave because it would make my job so much easier. Bad strategy. You're probably not going to win that way. So everybody's replaceable, including yourself. So don't offer an ultimatum for your future. So I want to tell a story about Shane Todd. And so Shane Todd was a pioneer of the Chick-fil-A milkshake. And a product as significant and successful as Chick-fil-A milkshake can never be credited to a single person. But if you were to ask Shane as the key driver for the innovation and evolution of a milkshake, Shane is a franchise owner and operator in Athens, Georgia. And if you're not familiar with Chick-fil-A's franchise model, a quick primer says this: Chick-fil-A uses an unusual, atypical franchise model for fast food restaurants where the corporate organization maintains ownership of the store. Because there is such direct corporate involvement, it leads to healthy tension for someone like Shane. He is both an employee of Chick-fil-A and has an ownership mindset for his own local store. As a leader with just managing a local restaurant, he is constantly looking for new ideas and new markets to introduce to his local Chick-fil-A. Long before the milkshake was launched nationwide in the spring of 2006, customers were already asking for another dessert options. Shane's own store was receiving multiple requests for milkshakes. The common thought at Chick-fil-A's central office was that it would take too long for them to provide a quality product without slowing down the high-quality quick service the store was committed to providing. According to Woody Falk, who was the vice president of menu strategy at the time, the milkshake project had been going in circles at headquarters. Things were now at a standstill. Despite some red flags from the product development team, Shane began covertly testing a milkshake in his store. He was determined to prove Woody Falk and others that this was an offering they could make to improve the customer satisfaction, and it could be done quickly. And so the Great Milkshake Experiment began at his store in Athens, Georgia. Shane and his team personally brought the ingredients to transform the ice cream that Chick-fil-A was already serving into a quality milkshake that customer likes. After tinkering with the product and training his employees how to prepare it, the team in Athens discovered a creative way to serve a delicious tasting milkshake while keeping the order times short. With very little marketing, word of mouth, Shane's store was selling hundreds of milkshakes every day. They had avoided setting off any major alarms at the corporate offices, and the Athens store had created an even greater need for a new product. It was clear that customers wanted milkshakes, and Shane's team had proved it could be done. The make it or break it moment for Shane's team came when Tim Tassoulopoulos, Senior Vice President of Operations, decided to drop in and see what all the fuss was about. Tim was the decision maker. He could say yes or no to their little trial. But Shane was ready for Tim's visit. Like an old Western gun show, Shane challenged Tim to make 2 Diet Cokes faster than he could make a milkshake. If Shane couldn't make the milkshake fast enough, the trial was over. If he could, Tim would agree to allow the milkshake sales can continue. And guess who won? If you've ever been to a Chick-fil-A and you've had a milkshake before, the whole idea started because somebody who was not in a position of authority challenged up. But see, he didn't just come and spit out an idea and say, I think we need to do milkshakes. He thought through it, did a couple things, and then proved it and showed its value. And it's a great story, especially if you like milkshakes from Chick-fil-A, because there's a couple core great leaderships things that come as a result of it. And specifically Shane Todd would say this, that he learned these 4 things. Number 1, great leaders challenge with the best motives. They aren't looking necessarily for their own gain. They aren't necessarily looking for their own people to say how great they did. Or they have the best motives. For Shane, people wanted this. And so he created it. So great leaders challenge with the best motives. Number 2, great leaders are keenly aware of what the boss is most interested in. Shane knew through this story that the people in their corporate offices were most concerned about order times. And so that's what he made the focus, and his challenge focused on that specifically. He met a customer need, and then he bounced it against what management wanted, and it provided a great solution. Number 3, great leaders know what's core and what's peripheral. What was he trying to address? Member satisfaction. He knew that at the core of the organization, their customers were the most important thing. And so he was focused on that, and he ignored the things that were peripheral outside. And number 4, great leaders challenge up quietly, but they are not silent. Right? He was quietly doing these things, but he was actively doing something behind the scenes. Great leaders, when they're looking to implement something that it might be a challenge, take these 4 things into consideration. So, before proposing a change to your boss or your manager, that you have to think through these 4 things. Number 1, how's your relationship with your boss? Right? Do they like you? Do they believe you're capable? And practice having some of these conversations so that when you do offer something that's going to be challenging, that's requesting a change, get an understanding of the best way to ask that. So a good way to think through this is that practice asking a question that might be challenging when the emotions are low. You could even ask something like, how would I say, manager, if I had a disagreement about something, what is the best way to approach you about it? Right? And making sure that it's a situation where you've had a good conversation or something and emotions are low behind it, because when you want to challenge on something, there's a good chance that your emotions are going to be a little bit higher, and then their emotions are also going to be higher, and they're going to be on a little bit more defensive, and it's not a good situation when emotions are high. So practice how your manager wants to have this conversation when emotions are low. Number 2, how's your posture? And your posture is not necessarily, are you sitting up straight? Are you looking forward? That sort of thing. Your posture is more, what's your posture towards your manager? We talked earlier, how do you what's your level of humility towards them as a leader? What's your posture towards them? Do you trust them? Do you trust that they are doing a good job? Do you trust that they are making decisions that are good for the department, good for the organization? If you don't, then you need to switch your mind, and you have to find the most generous explanation for their behavior, and you have to believe it wholeheartedly. Truth is, you may be missing information. Right? Thomas Park says the greatest remedy for anger is delay. So prepare yourself for a no if that ever comes to anything that you want to challenge about. Third thing, be clear. Do not beat around the bush. This is your responsibility. You are the only one who is explaining the situation. You have to be clear. If you are not clear, this falls squarely on your responsibility. If their no comes to you because you are unclear, that is squarely your responsibility. Number 4 is to be smooth. That can be a great idea. You can have, it makes all the sense in the world, but if you communicate it poorly, and it comes with a poor presentation, it's going to fall flat, and again, that's your fault. So, how do you do that? Are you the most eloquent speaker? Can you say things really well, think well on your feet? If so, then this should be an okay situation for you. But if not, here's 2 suggestions on some things to say. Number 1, you say to your manager, I really believe in you and I love working for you, but I have something I want to bring up that could help us grow. And maybe I'm missing something, but I think this might be a better solution for all of us. Or maybe another way to say, I want your advice on something. I have an idea that I think will make us better, but I want to know what you think about it. I've thought a lot about it. It might initially create some complications, but in the end, I think we'll be glad we made the change because of the results it could produce. These ideas, these quotes, this way to frame things is going to soften the blow and is going to make it more likely that when you challenge on something where you think there needs to be a change, that's going to make it much more successful. So, conclusion: how do you lead when you're not in charge? Well, consider this, right? Start by asking yourself what type of leader you want to be tomorrow, and start working to be that leader today. Why? Because you're already building that reputation. You already have influence in one way or another. The question is, what is your influence on other people? Is it moving things forward, or is it holding people back? Do people really enjoy being around you, or are people intimidated by you? What's your level of influence already? Because you already are building a reputation, or you already have a reputation. You see, the best leaders are learners. So learn to lead by being a better learner. Your influence comes, your leadership comes when you act with discipline and intentionality. And that is how you lead when you're not in charge. Now, just so you are aware, this entire presentation is done by a book. The book is called How to Lead When You're Not in Charge by Clay Scroggins, who I quoted a couple times through this elective. Now, just so you're aware, Clay Scroggins is a pastor. This is a faith-based book, but it is an excellent book. It is funny and motivating, and I hope that you would pick it up and take it. It's a lot of these core concepts that are here. So I hope you enjoyed this. Go out, lead when you're not in charge by having influence.